How do you like our new bumper music? For those of you who saw the first year of our show, you'll recognize the nautical theme that was part of our title sequence. So thought I'd add that in for a little boost to get you into the show. So hello, I'm Kevin Bemmel, and I'm your host on Business Lessons from the Military, and we're here every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, to talk about military doctrine, history, and practices of great military leaders that we can then translate for use in our professional pursuits. If we run a business, or we work for a business, or even a nonprofit, or in academia, I think these lessons broadly apply. So last week we started on a new topic in Marine Corps warfighting doctrine. It's actually the final topic we're going to discuss in this particular set of doctrine, and that's intelligence, the spy versus spy type of intelligence. And so we're going to continue with that discussion today. And let's see, here we go, share screen. Excuse me. And one more moment. We'll get there we go. We have to, anything that has to do with the military has to have a PowerPoint, okay? So here we are. And of course, here's our 3 pillars of attainment. Today we're, as we are with most of the episodes of this show, we're dealing here in the finances realm of the pursuits pillar, although as I've mentioned many times, we will sometimes dive into other parts of the 3 pillars of attainment. So last week we talked about the objective of intelligence, and primarily it is to support decision making. So if you're interested in how to or in the objective of intelligence. So I invite you to go to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@the-way-to-wow, and you can view last week's episode. So today we're going to talk about what I call intelligence defined. So the word intelligence can have many meanings, and we want to get very clear on, now that we know why we want this information, or why we want intelligence, I should say, now I think we need to be more specific about what it is, what intelligence is. So we start out, typically, we can gather information. So information is data, it's facts, it may even be impressions. So we may do a survey of customers for our product, and ask them. I get the, for example, this springs to mind. So I'm on this. I don't know if you call it a panel. It's just a group of people that routinely are asked to respond to surveys that a company does for the Wall Street Journal, and I think it's done for their advertisers, so the advertisers can determine how effective is their advertising. So typically, one of the surveys will say, well, do you remember seeing this ad? To which I almost always click no, because I frankly ignore the ads in the newspaper. But then on the rare occasions where I'll say yes, so then it'll go on to ask me, what do I think of this company? Is it a leader? Is it a this? Is it a that? Right? So that's just raw information, and it's not necessarily factual in the sense that, although whether I saw the ad or not may be a fact, my opinion about the company isn't, I wouldn't call that a fact per se, right? That's just an opinion. But that information they get from that survey is just that. It's unrefined data, unrefined opinions. Doesn't really mean anything. Okay, it's like when you get you know you mine ore and there's gold in it, but I mean, right now all you've got is the rock with maybe a vein of gold going through it. Well, so it eventually could be worth something when it's refined, but as it is right now, it's just a hunk of rock for the most part. Okay, what becomes useful is knowledge. So knowledge is refined information, right? It's something that's usable. So to go back to the survey I was mentioning, let's say that I think they did one earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. I think it was targeted at Samsung, which is I believe it's a South Korean electronics company. So it asked me, have I heard of Samsung? What do I think about them, kind of thing, right? So my response by itself is just some information. And in fact, let's say they got 1,000 responses. That's still just information. Now, out of those 1,000, now if you take those 1,000 responses, and let's say they were to find that 630 out of the 1,000 had heard of Samsung or knew of Samsung. So 63% of responders had brand awareness. Okay, now we've got some knowledge there, right? And that's something that Samsung can use, especially, let's say, one of their competitors is Sony. So let's say a similar survey were done for Sony, and they found out that 80% of respondents were aware of the Sony brand. So at 63%, right? Now you've got some knowledge. You've got that Sony has 80% brand awareness. Samsung has 63%. There's a 17% gap there. Okay, do you see? So that's knowledge. It's helping you, or it's helping the people really in either company understand the market. We could do the same thing here in the United States with, Coke versus Pepsi, right? Although I suspect that Coke and Pepsi have pretty similar brand awareness in the United States, right? So, what percentage of people prefer Coca-Cola over Pepsi and vice versa, right? In the sort of cola wars, right? And you could put, Royal Crown Cola way below, and then you've got Shasta Cola and whatever, right? So I imagine Coke and Pepsi are probably, up here at the top, and then you have all the little ones down here at the bottom. So you can take raw information, but then you can turn it into knowledge, okay? So, oh, well, that's so weird when it does that. Okay, stay there. All right. So intelligence then is the analysis and synthesis of information that turns it into knowledge. Okay. And the reason I think it ends up being called intelligence is it takes thought to do that, to contextualize the information so that it has some utility, right? Some usefulness, right? So going back to the example of Samsung and Sony. So if we see that and by the way, I'm making these numbers up. I don't know that they're accurate, but if 63%, if Samsung has 63% brand awareness and Sony has 80% brand awareness, right? So that information has been analyzed, it's been synthesized, and now we have a picture of the relative awareness of the brand within the marketplace. Okay. But more than that, what really makes this intelligence is it leads to something that is actionable. On the part of Sony, it's to maintain its market lead. In the case of Samsung, it's to see what the gap is and that there's room for growth. Okay, so if 80% of people have heard of Sony, then presumably there's more than 63% of people who want to know about the type of products that Sony and Samsung manufacture. So if Samsung is down here at 63, they've got an opportunity to increase their brand awareness. And perhaps 80%, by the way, isn't the ceiling. So another type of information you might gather is, how many people use televisions, or I don't know, do people use DVD players anymore? I think everything is streaming, but let's just say televisions, right? So if 90% of people use televisions, right? Even for Sony, they've still got a 10% gap in essence to make up, because evidently 10% of people who use televisions don't know about Sony and that Sony makes televisions, and even more so for Samsung, okay? So that can lead to an objective for those companies to try and meet, okay? So we start out with information, we analyze it and synthesize it through the intelligence process to end up with knowledge. But in order for that knowledge to truly be intelligence, it must be actionable, okay? So that's kind of the stacking up of how we define intelligence, both from a military standpoint and from a business standpoint, okay? So let's, I think we've got time to do this. So let's just take a little example of intelligence in at the tactical level of a military situation, okay? So let's say, you're a company commander and you have orders to take a particular objective, okay? So you certainly don't want to attack that objective blind, okay? You hopefully you've got some intelligence about the strength of the enemy, where the enemy is placed, what kind of artillery it has, et cetera, okay? Now, let's take one of those pieces of intelligence. Let's say the enemy has a force of 250 men. Okay, so that's fine, but are they 250 riflemen? Are they 150 riflemen and 100 artillerymen? Or are they 250 headquarters people like clerks and radio operators and all of that, right? So there's a vast difference in the actionability of the intelligence based on what it really is. So if the intelligence is that there is an infantry company holding the objective, okay, that's a much more actionable, that's a much more different type of piece of intelligence than that there's a company-sized group of people on the objective, okay? And by the way, they could say, well, there's a company headquarters at the objective, but it's just the headquarters element. Wow, so that makes a much different action on the part of that company that's looking to take that objective than there's a company of artillery there. There's an infantry company there. Okay, now presumably when they get this intelligence, let's take the example where the intelligence is there's an infantry company holding the objective. Okay, so presumably with that comes what the composition of a typical infantry company for the enemy is comprised of, right? It's comprised of three platoons of infantry, a headquarters element, and one battery of artillery or something like that. Okay, so now they not only do they know the size, but they know the composition of the enemy, and they can then plan their attack with a lot more confidence. That intelligence is much more actionable than just knowing the raw numbers. Okay, so that's what we mean by the intelligence must be actionable in order for it to truly be intelligence, for it to truly have value as intelligence. It should help direct what it is that, in this case, the attacking company needs to do. Likewise, going back to business then, in order for intelligence to truly be actionable, it should give guidance, signposts, if you will, as to what steps the organization can take in order to better meet its mission. Okay. All right. And I think we've got one more. Yeah. Okay. Now, here's what I call the intelligence challenge. Intelligence on a competitor is not as concrete as knowledge about ourselves. Okay, so if knowledge is the process of analysis and synthesis of information to knowledge, we can create intelligence about ourselves. Okay, and we can go through the intelligence process really on ourselves. What we end up with in terms of knowledge will be concrete, because there are no, well, at least presumably there are no barriers to our access to information, and we can be much clearer about the analysis and synthesis we need to do in order to gain knowledge of our own organization. Now, when we're working the intelligence process on a competitor, right off the bat, we're going to face some challenges in terms of getting information, not just in collecting it, but in determining the accuracy of it. Okay, so the challenger could be sort of letting information out, and depending on how that's being done, we may not know if that information is correct, or maybe they're just letting that out to fool us, right? To trick us. It's sort of disinformation, and that word gets, I think, overused a little bit, but we can't be sure. So we can try and verify information that we have about the competitor, but we may not be able to verify it 100%. As a result, we can't be as sure about our analysis and synthesis of that information into knowledge about our competitor. So that is the challenge of intelligence. And typically when we talk about intelligence, we don't talk about intelligence with respect to our own organization. We really mean we don't mean knowledge about our own organization. We're really talking about knowledge of our competitors, right? So that's why I call it the intelligence challenge, because the intelligence that we have of our competitors is never going to be, or I shouldn't say never, but rarely is it going to be as thorough, as concrete as the knowledge we have about our own organization. Okay, and so while intelligence can clear up some of the fog of the marketplace and the business competitive market, it can't clear away all the fog. Okay, and that's really not the goal, right? The goal is to do as good a job as we can in the time we have allotted, right, to go back to our primary objective, which is to support decision making. So an intelligence process that is not getting us actionable data within the time frame that a decision needs to be made is a flawed intelligence process at best, right? Because it's not supporting this primary objective, which is being able to make decisions, or I might have put being able to make better decisions than we could have in the absence of the intelligence on our competitors, right? So just, reviewing real quickly then, intelligence is the analysis and synthesis of information into knowledge. Okay, it's a process. We tend to think of intelligence as a product, and it is, but it's also a process. And in many ways, it's an ongoing process. So each time we get new inputs, we need to potentially reanalyze, resynthesize our information into knowledge, so that we can see how does it affect the actionability of that intelligence, right? As we seek to deal with the challenge, the intelligence challenge of never having as concrete a view or as concrete knowledge about our competitors and the overall marketplace as we can about our own organization, right? So that's the definition and challenge of intelligence. Okay, and that pretty much took us to the end here. So go ahead and actually here, stop sharing. That's what I need to do. Okay. Oh, and I need to end this as well. That's right. Okay, there we go. So that's the show for today. And next week on Business Lessons from the Military, we will continue in this discussion of the uses of intelligence in the business world, taking these military concepts and converting them for use in the private sector. So tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. is People Making Money, and we will be talking about financial statements. So if we want to really understand our organizations, whether it's a business, whether it's a nonprofit, at least part of that is understanding our financial situation. If we want to understand our personal finances, okay, financial statements are a way of doing that. So I'm going to be talking about the two most basic financial statements that we can generate and what they're about and how to compile them and that kind of thing as a way of gaining better knowledge about our personal finances and our professional finances. So that's tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then next week on Monday at 10 a.m. is the next edition of Trust and Estates Weekly. So those are our three shows for the week. And I invite you to join us. You can join us live here in the meetings, and that way you can ask questions of what we're discussing, or you can watch us online through our YouTube channel live or through 8 other social media outlets, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Twitch, and I don't remember the other ones, but they're all available for you to watch on your favorite social media channels. So I invite you to do that as well. And if you haven't been to my YouTube channel, please do check it out. And while you're there, would you consider subscribing? I certainly would appreciate it. And that way you'll be informed whenever a new episode posts. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. and signing off as I always do. Marie, you're my belle, darling.